History isn't just a record of the past, it's a puzzle filled with secrets, questions, and truths buried on purpose. Welcome to the channel, where we go beyond the surface, challenge the official stories, and uncover the mysteries the world was never supposed to remember. If you love lost civilizations, hidden timelines, ancient technology, and shocking historical evidence, you're exactly where you need to be. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a discovery that could change what we think we know about history. And watch till the end, because the final reveal is always what ties the entire mystery together. The truth doesn't show up in the first minute, it shows up in the last one. Now, let's get into the video. The rise of a legend. Alexander III of Macedon, known to history as Alexander the Great, occupies a place in human memory reserved for figures of mythic proportions. Born in 356 BCE in the ancient city of Pella, Macedonia, he would become a man whose ambitions and military genius reshaped the known world. Yet, paradoxically, the location of his final resting place, a tomb that should have stood as a monument to his unparalleled conquests, remains a riddle that has haunted historians, archaeologists, and treasure seekers for over 2 millennia. To understand the enigma of Alexander's hidden tomb, we must first understand the magnitude of the man himself. The son of King Philip II of Macedon and Queen Olympias, Alexander was a product of both royal ambition and meticulous tutelage. His father, an astute strategist and ruthless leader, had unified the fractious Greek city-states under Macedonian rule, setting the stage for Alexander's inheritance. Alexander's mother, Olympias, claimed descent from the Greek hero Achilles, instilling in him a sense of divine destiny. It was a combination of political acumen and personal myth-making that would drive Alexander to transform himself from prince to conqueror. At the age of 13, Alexander was tutored by none other than Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of the era. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed not only a sharp intellect but also a profound curiosity about the natural world, philosophy, and the cultures he would one day encounter. This education was not merely academic, it was strategic. Aristotle instilled in him the ideal of a world shaped by reason, ambition, and conquest, a philosophy that would become a blueprint for empire building. By the time he ascended to the Macedonian throne in 336 BCE, following the assassination of Philip II, Alexander was not merely a young king, he was a man poised to rewrite history. Within a decade, he would subdue the Persian Empire, venture into India, and establish cities that became centers of Hellenistic culture, trade, and political authority. Among these cities, Alexandria in Egypt would become the most famous, its library a symbol of knowledge, learning, and, as some argue, secrecy. Yet, for all the military triumphs and cultural legacies, the narrative of Alexander's life comes to an abrupt, mysterious halt with his death in 323 BCE at the age of 32. He passed away in Babylon under circumstances that remain controversial, with theories ranging from natural illness to poisoning. Historians have long debated the events leading to his death, but few disputes have generated as much intrigue as what happened to his body afterward. Historical accounts suggest that Alexander's corpse was intended to be displayed in a grand funeral procession, a demonstration of the power he wielded even in death. Yet this procession, unlike the elaborate ceremonies for other great rulers of antiquity, seems to have vanished from recorded history. Instead, Alexander's body was reportedly intercepted by Ptolemy, one of his generals and later ruler of Egypt. Ptolemy diverted the funeral cortege to Egypt, laying the groundwork for the first tangible mystery surrounding Alexander's final resting place. The tomb that should have been a pan-Hellenic shrine was now in the hands of a single successor. The ancient sources, Plutarch, Arrian, Diodorus Siculus, offer tantalizing fragments about the subsequent journey of Alexander's body. Some claim it was initially placed in Memphis before being transferred to Alexandria, the city Ptolemy would use as a political and cultural capital. According to later writers, the tomb in Alexandria became a pilgrimage site for rulers and commoners alike. Roman emperors, from Julius Caesar to Augustus, reportedly paid homage to Alexander's remains. Yet despite these accounts, no definitive archaeological evidence has ever surfaced to confirm the tomb's location. Over the centuries, the trail goes cold, giving rise to a cascade of rumors, myths, and deliberate obfuscations. Why would the tomb of one of history's most celebrated figures disappear? Some historians point to the shifting sands of political power in Egypt. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Alexandria for nearly 3 centuries, may have intentionally hidden or altered the location of the tomb to consolidate authority and prevent any rival factions from exploiting Alexander's legacy. Others suggest that successive invasions, by Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, and eventually Ottomans, led to the destruction or concealment of the site. Complicating matters further, Alexandria itself has undergone dramatic geographical changes, with parts of the ancient city now submerged beneath the Mediterranean due to earthquakes and rising sea levels. The very terrain that might hold clues to Alexander's final resting place has been altered, obscured, or erased over millennia. Adding to the intrigue is the possibility of deliberate historical erasure. Alexander was not merely a conqueror, he was a figure whose mythic stature transcended his mortal life. His image could inspire, but it could also threaten. In an era when rulers legitimized authority through lineage, conquest, and divine association, controlling the narrative of Alexander's life and death was paramount. To obscure his tomb was to exert control over history itself, to dictate who could claim the mantle of his legacy. The mystery of Alexander's tomb is further compounded by tantalizing accounts of treasure, relics, and even secret knowledge that may have accompanied his body. Ancient texts allude to golden sarcophagi, ceremonial weapons, and ornate burial garments. Some speculative theories suggest that the tomb may have contained inscriptions or artifacts revealing lost secrets of empire, governance, or even esoteric wisdom, knowledge that, if revealed, could destabilize empires or empower future rulers. Whether these claims are myth, exaggeration, or fragments of suppressed history remains an open question. Archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters alike have scoured Alexandria and the surrounding regions for centuries. Explorers such as Leo Frobenius in the early 20th century, and more recent teams using modern technology, have attempted to locate the tomb through sonar, satellite imagery, and excavation of submerged ruins. Yet each attempt has ended in frustration or inconclusive results. The further back one traces Alexander's final journey, the murkier the trail becomes, suggesting not just loss by accident, but possibly deliberate concealment. In addition to the historical and archaeological challenges, the story of Alexander's tomb is entwined with the evolution of legend. Over time, the figure of Alexander transformed from a historical conqueror into a near-mythical entity. He became a symbol not only of ambition but of mortality, the fragility of human endeavor, and the interplay between legacy and oblivion. Writers in antiquity and medieval chroniclers alike added layers of embellishment, blending fact with fiction in ways that continue to confound modern researchers. Tales of Alexander's body being moved multiple times, of miraculous preservations, or of magical curses guarding the tomb, illustrate the potent combination of reverence and fear that surrounded his memory. By the time the medieval world came into contact with the remnants of classical knowledge, Alexander had become both an object of admiration and a cipher of secrecy. Scholars in Alexandria, Constantinople, and even the Islamic world preserved fragments of Greek and Roman texts that referenced Alexander's death and burial, but these references were inconsistent and sometimes contradictory. What remains clear is that, for reasons both practical and symbolic, Alexander's final resting place was deliberately obscured from public knowledge, a silence that echoes through the corridors of history to this day. As we begin this journey into one of history's most enduring mysteries, it is crucial to recognize the duality of Alexander's legacy. On one hand, he was a man of extraordinary ambition, intellect, and charisma, whose campaigns redefined the political and cultural landscape of the ancient world. On the other hand, his death introduced a mystery that has challenged every generation since, a riddle that intertwines geography, politics, religion, and human psychology. The question is not merely where Alexander was buried, but why the knowledge of his tomb was so systematically erased, hidden, or lost. In the following parts of this documentary, we will trace Alexander's final days, the historical accounts of his funeral procession, the political machinations of his successors, and the attempts to locate his tomb across centuries. We will examine archaeological evidence, analyze ancient texts, and explore modern theories that range from plausible to fantastical. The search for Alexander's tomb is not just a quest for a physical site, it is a journey into the ways history is written, remembered, and sometimes deliberately concealed. By understanding the rise and fall of Alexander's presence in recorded history, we can begin to appreciate the magnitude of the mystery. It is a story of ambition and conquest, of political intrigue and historical erasure, of legends built to inspire and legends buried to protect. And, perhaps, hidden somewhere beneath the shifting sands and waters of time lies the ultimate truth about the tomb of the world's greatest conqueror. Death in Babylon and the first disappearance. The city of Babylon, situated on the fertile banks of the Euphrates River, was one of the most magnificent metropolises of the ancient world. In 323 BCE, it became the final stage of Alexander the Great's extraordinary life. By this point, Alexander had conquered a vast territory stretching from Greece and Egypt to Persia and the edges of India. Yet, despite his invincible military reputation and godlike status, he was not immune to the vulnerabilities of the human body. Accounts of Alexander's death are conflicting and enigmatic. Plutarch, Arrian, and Diodorus Siculus all provide slightly different narratives, reflecting the inconsistencies of ancient reporting. Some sources claim that Alexander fell ill with a fever that lasted for several days, exacerbated perhaps by exhaustion, wounds from battle, or a drinking binge during a celebratory banquet. Others suggest poisoning, though historians generally discount this as improbable due to the lack of immediate lethal symptoms and the absence of political evidence implicating rivals. Regardless of the cause, what is certain is that Alexander's passing left a vast empire without a clear heir, an empire balanced precariously on his personal charisma and military genius. Alexander's death triggered an immediate crisis among his generals, known as the Diadochi, or successors. These men were powerful, ambitious, and far from unified. Some, like Ptolemy, had loyally served him for years; others, like Perdiccas, aspired to control the empire themselves. The question of how to handle Alexander's body became not just a matter of respect, but a critical political lever. To possess his corpse was to claim legitimacy and influence over the empire. Whoever controlled Alexander's remains could symbolically inherit his authority, an inheritance more potent than armies or gold. According to historical sources, Alexander expressed a wish to be buried at the temple of Zeus Ammon in Siwa, Egypt, a site that carried immense religious significance. He had visited the oracle of Ammon during his campaigns in the Libyan desert, and the Egyptians regarded the site as a place of divine authority. Placing his tomb there would have enshrined his semi-divine status, linking his mortal life with the favor of the gods. However, the logistics of transporting a royal body across hundreds of miles of desert, through politically volatile territories, were daunting. The decision ultimately fell into the hands of his generals, and it would mark the first turning point in the deliberate obscuration of his final resting place. Ptolemy, a trusted companion and commander, seized an unprecedented opportunity. According to Plutarch, he diverted Alexander's funeral procession, originally intended for Babylon or Siwa, and redirected it to Egypt. Some historians argue that this was motivated by loyalty, as Ptolemy had personal admiration for Alexander. Others suggest the move was entirely strategic. By bringing the body to Egypt, Ptolemy could legitimize his rule as governor and eventually pharaoh, reinforcing the Ptolemaic dynasty's claim over one of the wealthiest regions of the known world. The act of rerouting Alexander's corpse was therefore both a symbolic and tactical maneuver, the effects of which resonate through history to this day. The funeral procession itself became an epic endeavor. Ancient accounts describe a grandiose caravan, accompanied by soldiers, nobles, and ceremonial attendants. Alexander's body was reportedly placed in a gold sarcophagus, encrusted with precious gems and guarded by elite troops. Some accounts suggest the body was embalmed using techniques designed to preserve it indefinitely, though the exact methods remain unknown. Along the journey, the cortege passed through cities that had fallen under Alexander's sway, each city paying homage and contributing to the spectacle. It was not merely a funeral, it was a public reaffirmation of his unparalleled dominance. Yet even as the procession progressed, the narrative of Alexander's tomb began to diverge into confusion. Various cities laid claims to parts of the journey, each describing alternative routes or temporary resting places for the body. Babylon, Susa, and other key locations all feature in scattered records, creating a historical haze. This ambiguity, whether accidental or intentional, marked the beginning of the deliberate obfuscation that would render Alexander's tomb virtually invisible to history. By the time Ptolemy brought the body to Egypt, the legend of a hidden, sacred burial site was already taking root. Once in Egypt, Alexander's corpse was placed in Memphis, a city with deep religious and political significance. Memphis had been a center of Egyptian administration for centuries, and its temples and monumental architecture offered an appropriate setting for the veneration of a figure of Alexander's stature. But it is here that the historical record begins to falter. Some sources suggest that Ptolemy, seeking to consolidate power, kept the location secret. Others imply that the body may have been moved to Alexandria, the city he founded and intended to serve as the heart of Hellenistic civilization. Alexandria's library, palaces, and tombs made it an ideal resting place for a ruler whose ambition transcended borders. Yet no definitive location was ever recorded, and over time, even eyewitness accounts became obscured by legend. The political stakes of controlling Alexander's tomb cannot be overstated. In a fragmented empire, the Diadochi were locked in a delicate balance of power, with each general seeking to assert dominance while avoiding outright conflict. Possession of Alexander's body symbolized legitimacy, a kind of divine endorsement that could rally troops, attract allies, and intimidate rivals. By seizing control of the tomb, or at least the knowledge of its location, Ptolemy effectively wielded a tool more powerful than armies or gold. He wielded history itself. This strategic advantage may explain why successive Ptolemaic rulers were so protective of the tomb's location, even as they allowed it to serve as a site of public veneration for political ends. Ancient texts hint at the tomb's prominence during the early Ptolemaic period. Writers like Strabo describe a mausoleum in Alexandria that drew visitors from across the Mediterranean. Roman emperors such as Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Hadrian are said to have paid homage at the site, and coins and inscriptions suggest that it remained a place of reverence for centuries. Yet even as its fame grew, the tomb's exact location became increasingly enigmatic. Plutarch notes that by the 3rd century CE, the site may have already been lost or intentionally concealed. By the time of the Byzantine period, reports of Alexander's tomb become scarce, replaced by speculation, rumor, and myth. Geography, politics, and urban development further complicated the matter. Alexandria, built on a delta of shifting sands and waterways, underwent centuries of transformation. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising sea levels gradually submerged parts of the ancient city, potentially engulfing the tomb in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, successive rulers, from Romans to Arabs, may have repurposed or destroyed monuments, either deliberately or inadvertently. The combined effects of natural disaster and human intervention contributed to a profound historical erasure, a deliberate or accidental removal of Alexander's physical legacy from the world. By the end of this tumultuous period, the stage was set for the enduring mystery. A tomb that should have been the centerpiece of a global legacy had effectively vanished. The question of its whereabouts became more than an archaeological puzzle, it became a symbol of the fragility of history itself. Alexander, a man who conquered the known world, had been reduced to stories, fragmented texts, and speculative maps. His memory endured, but his final resting place did not. Alexandria and the guarding of a legacy. The city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE on the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, was destined to become more than just a strategic port or a cultural hub. It was to be the symbolic center of his empire, and, perhaps more importantly, the final resting place of its founder. The young conqueror had designed Alexandria with precision, broad avenues, monumental buildings, and a harbor that would connect Egypt to the wider Mediterranean world. Its layout reflected both practical urban planning and Alexander's vision of a city that would embody Hellenistic culture and power. After his body was diverted to Egypt by Ptolemy, the city was prepared to host a tomb that would rival any in history. Ancient sources, while often inconsistent, suggest that Alexander's remains were eventually entombed in a mausoleum in Alexandria. Some accounts describe it as a grandiose structure, adorned with gold, statues, and intricate carvings that celebrated the life and deeds of the conqueror. Strabo, the Greek geographer writing in the 1st century BCE, references a tomb in Alexandria visited by locals and travelers alike, highlighting its continuing importance centuries after Alexander's death. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Egypt following Alexander's death, had a vested interest in the tomb. By housing the remains of the world's most celebrated conqueror, the Ptolemies could legitimize their rule, linking themselves symbolically to the Macedonian king and asserting their divine and political authority over Egypt and beyond. Historical accounts suggest that the rulers of Alexandria protected the tomb zealously, controlling access and maintaining its sanctity. Pilgrims, officials, and dignitaries may have been allowed to pay homage, but the precise location was closely guarded, ensuring that no rival power could exploit Alexander's remains to assert legitimacy. Roman sources provide additional glimpses of the tomb's significance. Julius Caesar, when he visited Egypt in 48 BCE during his campaign against Ptolemy XIII, is said to have paid respects to Alexander's tomb. Augustus, the first Roman emperor, also reportedly visited, possibly using his presence to strengthen the narrative of Rome as the inheritor of Hellenistic culture and Alexander's legacy. The fact that emperors from distant lands traveled to Alexandria to honor Alexander indicates that the tomb remained a focal point of political symbolism for centuries. Despite these historical references, by the late Roman and early Byzantine periods, reports of Alexander's tomb become increasingly vague. Travelers and historians wrote about it, yet no detailed description survived. Some suggest that the Ptolemaic dynasty, or their Roman successors, may have intentionally concealed the exact location as a form of political control. Others speculate that natural disasters, particularly earthquakes, floods, and the gradual subsidence of the Nile Delta, may have physically altered the landscape, making the tomb harder to locate or access. The city of Alexandria itself, while magnificent, was highly vulnerable to the forces of nature. Located on the edge of the Mediterranean, parts of the city gradually sank beneath the sea due to tectonic activity and rising water levels. Many ancient monuments, streets, and docks are now submerged, hidden beneath layers of sediment. This shifting geography has frustrated archaeologists for centuries, leaving the tomb of Alexander shrouded in both legend and literal concealment. Medieval Islamic scholars also recorded accounts of the tomb. Arab historians such as al-Masudi in the 10th century CE mentioned the existence of a tomb of Alexander in Egypt, though their descriptions were often filtered through centuries of legend. In some texts, Alexander is referred to as Dul-Qarnayn, a figure mentioned in the Quran, further blurring historical fact with myth. These cultural reinterpretations contributed to both the mystique of the tomb and the difficulty of identifying it with certainty. Over the centuries, a pattern emerges: the more powerful and politically significant Alexander's tomb became, the more it was protected, hidden, or obscured. It functioned as both a shrine and a weapon of legitimacy. The tomb's concealment was a form of control over historical memory, a way for successive rulers to dictate who could claim connection to the legacy of Alexander, and by extension, to the power he embodied. The political strategy behind the tomb's secrecy may explain why, despite repeated attempts over 2 millennia, no conclusive archaeological evidence has surfaced. The legend of Alexander's tomb grew alongside the man himself. Writers and historians added layers of speculation that the tomb contained golden treasures beyond imagination, ceremonial artifacts of divine significance, or inscriptions revealing secrets of empire. Some accounts even suggested mystical protections, curses, or the presence of guardians ensuring that only the worthy could approach. While these stories may be exaggerated or entirely mythical, they reflect the profound cultural and psychological weight of Alexander's burial place, a site that could inspire devotion, awe, or fear. By the late medieval period, Alexandria had undergone considerable transformation. Conquests by Byzantines, Arabs, and later the Ottomans altered the cityscape dramatically. Structures were repurposed, destroyed, or abandoned. The gradual decline of the Library of Alexandria, often associated with the same city complex as Alexander's tomb, further illustrates how knowledge and memory could be lost even in relatively recent history. These combined forces, natural disaster, urban evolution, and deliberate human intervention, created a situation in which the tomb of Alexander might exist, yet remain invisible to all who sought it. In parallel with the physical disappearance, the historical narrative of Alexander's tomb became fractured. Ancient texts, already inconsistent, were copied, translated, and interpreted over centuries, often introducing errors, omissions, or embellishments. As a result, modern scholars face the dual challenge of locating a tomb that may have been lost, destroyed, or hidden, while also untangling centuries of distorted accounts, myths, and conflicting reports. Despite these obstacles, interest in the tomb never waned. During the Renaissance, European scholars revived classical texts, hoping to locate Alexandria's lost treasures, including Alexander's resting place. Explorers and archaeologists continued the quest into the modern era, employing new tools like sonar mapping, satellite imaging, and underwater excavation. Yet each effort encounters the same fundamental challenges: an ancient city submerged and transformed, historical accounts that are contradictory, and, possibly, deliberate concealment by the Ptolemies or later rulers. The story of Alexandria and Alexander's tomb is therefore not just a tale of historical mystery, it is a study of how power, memory, and legacy intersect. The city served as a physical and symbolic stage for the preservation and erasure of one of history's greatest figures. The tomb itself became more than a resting place, it was a tool of authority, a repository of myth, and a symbol of the enduring influence of Alexander's life and empire. Roman reverence and the vanishing tomb. By the 1st century BCE, Alexandria had become a thriving metropolis under Ptolemaic rule, its influence extending far beyond Egypt. The city's strategic location and cultural prominence made it a key player in Mediterranean politics. It was during this period that Alexander's tomb, long a symbol of dynastic legitimacy for the Ptolemies, drew the attention of Rome, a rising power whose leaders were keenly aware of the political and symbolic value of the Macedonian conqueror. Julius Caesar's arrival in Alexandria in 48 BCE was more than a military campaign, it was a collision of historical legacies. Caesar's forces intervened in the Ptolemaic civil war, supporting Cleopatra VII in her bid for the throne. Accounts suggest that Caesar paid homage to Alexander's tomb, perhaps recognizing the potential of aligning himself with the memory of a man who had once ruled the known world. By publicly venerating Alexander, Caesar reinforced his own image as a leader connected to the grand traditions of empire, conquest, and divine favor. Following Caesar, Augustus, then Octavian, also visited Alexandria and reportedly honored the tomb. The Roman emperors understood that Alexander's legacy was more than historical, it was an instrument of political power. Reverence for the tomb was a form of diplomacy, a way to assert influence over Egypt and to link Roman authority with the aura of Hellenistic greatness. Coins, inscriptions, and Roman accounts reference these visits, indicating that the tomb remained an active, culturally significant site during the early Roman period. Yet despite its prominence, signs of instability around the tomb begin to appear. Historical records suggest that the precise location may have already been subject to concealment. Some ancient sources hint at restricted access, guarded by elite soldiers or ceremonial officials. This secrecy, likely a continuation of Ptolemaic policy, ensured that the tomb's power as a symbol of legitimacy could not be co-opted by rivals. Rome, while outwardly reverent, may have respected, or been compelled to respect, this secrecy. The physical and environmental challenges facing Alexandria compounded the uncertainty. Earthquakes, subsidence, and flooding gradually altered the cityscape. Ancient structures, including monumental tombs, could be destabilized or submerged without notice. Even in antiquity, some writers noted that Alexandria's architecture and streets were vulnerable to these natural forces. It is entirely plausible that parts of the tomb, or even the entire structure, were damaged or partially lost over time, contributing to the growing mystery. Meanwhile, the historical accounts of Alexander's tomb became increasingly inconsistent. While Roman sources confirm the tomb's existence, they provide few reliable details about its appearance, dimensions, or contents. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century CE, notes that Alexander's body was still present in Alexandria and that people paid homage to it, yet he provides little practical information about its precise location. Similarly, other Roman-era historians mention the tomb in passing, reinforcing its fame without clarifying its whereabouts. This ambiguity created fertile ground for legend. Stories of golden sarcophagi, elaborate treasures, and magical protections began to proliferate. By the late Roman period, travelers and chroniclers wrote of visiting the tomb but described it in fantastical terms, its riches and splendor amplified with each retelling. Some accounts even claimed that the body itself was preserved miraculously, a narrative likely influenced by both reverence and political motivations to enhance the tomb's perceived sanctity. Religious factors also began to play a role. As Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, the symbolic power of ancient pagan monuments shifted. Alexander's tomb, once a focal point of Hellenistic and Ptolemaic culture, became less central in the public religious landscape. However, its historical and political significance did not vanish. Early Christian writers occasionally reference Alexandria's ancient monuments, sometimes alluding obliquely to Alexander, highlighting the tension between cultural memory and evolving religious ideology. By the Byzantine period, the tomb's visibility diminishes further. Records become fragmentary, and reports often contradict each other. Some suggest that the tomb may have been deliberately hidden or even relocated. The reasons for such concealment are speculative but plausible: political instability, internal power struggles, or the desire to protect Alexander's remains from desecration. The notion of deliberate historical erasure, first hinted at in the Ptolemaic era, gains increasing plausibility. Meanwhile, the urban development of Alexandria continued to transform the landscape. New palaces, administrative buildings, and religious structures replaced or absorbed older sites. The combination of natural disaster, human construction, and political interference created a scenario in which a tomb that had once been prominent could gradually disappear from both memory and the physical world. The allure of Alexander's tomb persisted despite, or perhaps because of, its growing elusiveness. During the Renaissance and early modern periods, European scholars and explorers combed ancient texts in search of clues. Maps of Alexandria, reconstructed from classical sources, were scrutinized for hints. Some expeditions even attempted underwater archaeology, suspecting that parts of the city, and possibly the tomb, had been swallowed by the Mediterranean. The disappearance of Alexander's tomb, therefore, was not a sudden event but a process that unfolded over centuries. Environmental degradation, urban transformation, political concealment, and cultural shifts combined to render one of the most important monuments of antiquity effectively invisible. And yet, the tomb's symbolic power never waned. The idea of a lost resting place for the world's greatest conqueror continued to captivate imaginations, fueling myths, legends, and persistent scholarly inquiry. Legends, reinterpretations, and the medieval enigma. As the Roman Empire waned and the Byzantine and Islamic worlds rose to prominence, Alexandria's place in history shifted, along with the legacy of Alexander the Great. The once vibrant Hellenistic city faced political upheaval, religious transformation, and environmental challenges, yet the legend of Alexander's tomb persisted, evolving in ways that merged history, myth, and spiritual reinterpretation. By the medieval period, much of the precise knowledge of Alexander's tomb had been lost. Accounts from the Byzantine era are sparse and contradictory. Some suggest that the tomb remained intact and known to local authorities, others hint that its location had already been concealed or obscured. This uncertainty created fertile ground for legend. Alexander's body, the treasures said to accompany it, and the very design of the tomb became subjects of speculation, amplification, and embellishment. Chronicles from travelers and scholars often recounted miraculous details: golden sarcophagi, jewel-encrusted caskets, and protective spells designed to guard the body from profane hands. It was during this period that the figure of Alexander began to transcend his purely historical identity and take on mythic qualities across cultures. In the Islamic world, Alexander was widely identified with Dhul-Qarnayn, the two-horned one, mentioned in the Quran. While the identification is debated, the association reflects how Alexander's persona was reinterpreted through the lens of new cultural and religious paradigms. Dhul-Qarnayn became a symbol of divine authority, wisdom, and just rulership, and the narratives surrounding him often included esoteric knowledge, travels to far lands, and the construction of monumental structures. These interpretations may have influenced local ideas about Alexander's tomb, casting it as a site not only of material wealth but also of spiritual and cosmic significance. Medieval Arab historians and geographers, such as al-Masudi and Ibn Khaldun, occasionally referenced Alexandria and its treasures. They described a city of immense wealth, cultural prominence, and mysterious monuments, sometimes alluding indirectly to the resting place of Alexander. Their accounts often blended fact with rumor, reflecting centuries of oral transmission and the reinterpretation of earlier Greek and Roman texts. This combination of historical fragment and legend further obscured the tomb's reality while enhancing its allure. The European medieval imagination also contributed to the evolving mythology. Crusaders, merchants, and scholars who traveled to the eastern Mediterranean recorded stories of a tomb that contained unimaginable treasures and relics. These accounts, while often second-hand or heavily embellished, fueled the idea that Alexander's final resting place was more than a burial site. It was a repository of knowledge, divine favor, and immense wealth. Such tales were a potent mix. They reflected genuine historical interest while also incorporating popular medieval motifs of guarded treasures and miraculous protection. Legends of curses and secret knowledge began to appear more prominently in this era. Stories suggested that any who attempted to disturb the tomb would face divine wrath or supernatural consequences. Some chroniclers implied that the Ptolemaic rulers, and later unknown guardians, had concealed knowledge about empire, philosophy, or the universe within the tomb itself. These narratives may have served dual purposes. They enhanced the mystique of Alexander's legacy while also discouraging looters or rival claimants from seeking the tomb. In essence, myth became a tool for both cultural preservation and practical protection. Meanwhile, Alexandria itself continued to evolve, sometimes violently. Conquests by Byzantines, Arabs, and later other regional powers led to transformations of the cityscape. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and gradual subsidence of the Nile Delta submerged significant portions of the ancient urban core. Entire districts, possibly including the site of Alexander's tomb, may have been lost beneath the sea or buried under centuries of sediment and construction. This environmental transformation compounded the effects of deliberate concealment, making archaeological recovery exponentially more difficult. By the late medieval period, the search for Alexander's tomb became a symbolic quest as much as a practical one. Scholars and adventurers were drawn not only by the promise of wealth but also by the allure of connecting with history's most legendary figure. Maps, manuscripts, and oral traditions were scrutinized for clues, yet every generation encountered the same fundamental obstacles: imprecise historical records, deliberate obfuscation by past rulers, and a city physically transformed by time and nature. The medieval reinterpretation of Alexander's figure and tomb reflects a broader pattern in history. As political and cultural landscapes change, memory becomes malleable. Alexander, once a historical conqueror, became a universal symbol, divine ruler, wise philosopher king, and possessor of hidden knowledge. His tomb, correspondingly, transformed from a physical site of mourning and veneration to an almost mythic locus of power and mystery. The lack of concrete evidence only strengthened its symbolic resonance. By the early Islamic period, Alexandria was increasingly recognized for both its historical significance and its strategic importance. Arab geographers and historians often marveled at the city's ruins, monuments, and legendary sites. While Alexander's tomb is rarely described in precise terms, references to grand mausoleums and revered figures suggest that knowledge of its location had already become highly restricted or lost. This period laid the foundation for the centuries-long legend of a lost tomb, a legend that would captivate explorers, archaeologists, and historians well into the modern era. The medieval and early Islamic narratives also introduced the notion that Alexander's tomb may contain artifacts of extraordinary power, either material, such as gold and treasures, or intellectual, such as writings, inscriptions, or codices with esoteric knowledge. These stories, whether founded in reality or entirely fictional, demonstrate the interplay between historical fact, political motive, and imaginative legend. They also provide insight into why successive rulers might have gone to extraordinary lengths to protect or obscure the tomb. Controlling the tomb meant controlling history itself. Renaissance curiosity and the quest for the lost tomb. The Renaissance, beginning in the 14th century in Europe, marked a revival of classical learning and a renewed fascination with antiquity. Scholars, explorers, and collectors sought to recover the knowledge, art, and legacies of the ancient world. Among the many mysteries that captured their imagination, Alexander the Great's tomb stood as one of the most alluring, a tangible connection to the man who had conquered empires, whose name inspired awe across continents, yet whose final resting place had vanished into history. Italian and French scholars were among the first in the Renaissance to comb ancient texts for references to Alexander's tomb. Manuscripts by Plutarch, Arrian, and Diodorus were rediscovered, copied, and analyzed, sometimes revealing tantalizing hints of its location. These scholars debated whether the tomb still existed, whether it had been relocated by the Ptolemies or Romans, or whether it had succumbed to natural disasters. Even in cases where the texts were unclear or contradictory, the fascination remained. The possibility of discovering Alexander's final resting place promised not only historical glory but also potential political or financial gain for those who could claim knowledge of it. Explorers and adventurers soon joined the intellectual pursuit. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European travelers to Egypt recorded observations of Alexandria's ruins, ancient streets, and submerged harbors. Some noted the existence of grand mausoleums or mysterious monuments, speculating that these might be related to Alexander. These accounts often mixed observation with legend, describing golden sarcophagi, treasures, or inscriptions that were reported but never verified. While modern historians view many of these descriptions as exaggerations, they reflect the intense interest and persistent hope that the tomb might yet be found. One of the central challenges faced by Renaissance explorers was the physical transformation of Alexandria over centuries. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and gradual subsidence had altered the coastline and submerged large portions of the ancient city beneath the Mediterranean. This made identifying original structures extraordinarily difficult. Explorers often relied on texts, local legends, and fragments of ruins to hypothesize potential locations. Maps drawn during this period, while innovative, were often inaccurate by modern standards, leaving the tomb's exact location obscured. In addition to geographic challenges, the tomb's historical obscuration compounded the difficulty. The Ptolemaic and later Roman authorities may have deliberately restricted access, and knowledge may have been passed down only orally within elite circles. By the Renaissance, any remaining practical knowledge of the tomb's location would likely have been lost or deeply hidden. The interplay of secrecy, political ambition, and natural transformation created a scenario where discovery required both scholarly insight and fortuitous luck. Treasure hunting and antiquarian expeditions became intertwined with the search. Tales of immense riches accompanying Alexander's body, gold, jewels, ceremonial artifacts, motivated adventurers as much as historical curiosity. Some sought wealth, others sought fame and influence by associating themselves with one of history's most powerful figures. The legend of a tomb filled with treasures thus became a self-perpetuating cycle. Stories fueled exploration, and exploration amplified stories, even in the absence of concrete evidence. Several European scholars during this period also speculated on the significance of Alexander's tomb in broader intellectual or spiritual terms. The Renaissance obsession with Hermeticism, alchemy, and ancient wisdom led some to theorize that the tomb contained esoteric knowledge, secret texts, maps, or symbols that could unlock hidden truths about the natural world or governance. While purely speculative, these theories contributed to the mystique surrounding the tomb and encouraged continued exploration and study. Despite centuries of interest, by the 17th century, no definitive trace of the tomb had emerged. Alexandria had been transformed again and again. Ottoman rule introduced new constructions, mosques, and fortifications, altering the urban landscape further. Earthquakes continued to shift structures, and portions of the ancient city remained submerged. Historical accounts suggest that locals may have preserved vague oral traditions of the tomb's location, but these were largely unhelpful to outsiders unfamiliar with the terrain and the stories embedded in local knowledge. The Renaissance and early modern interest in Alexander's tomb also influenced historiography. Scholars began to recognize the difficulty of separating fact from legend, particularly when sources were inconsistent or derived from centuries of retelling. Critical methods emerged to analyze ancient texts and assess their reliability, laying the foundation for modern historical and archaeological practices. Yet, even with improved methodology, the tomb remained elusive. By the end of the early modern period, the quest for Alexander's tomb had evolved from a practical search for a burial site into a multifaceted pursuit, part archaeology, part legend, part intellectual fascination, and part treasure hunt. The combination of lost knowledge, environmental transformation, and deliberate concealment ensured that the tomb would remain a mystery, challenging explorers and scholars for generations to come. Modern archaeology and the elusive tomb. The 19th century marked a turning point in the study of ancient civilizations. With the rise of modern archaeology, systematic excavation techniques, and a growing interest in classical history, explorers began to examine Alexandria and its surrounding regions in unprecedented detail. The search for Alexander the Great's tomb shifted from speculative Renaissance conjecture to a more disciplined investigation, yet the tomb remained elusive, hidden beneath layers of history, legend, and geological change. European powers, particularly France and Britain, were deeply involved in archaeological projects throughout Egypt. Alexandria, with its rich Hellenistic past and strategic coastal location, became a focal point for scholars and treasure hunters alike. Early excavations uncovered portions of the ancient city, colonnaded streets, temples, and public monuments. Yet despite these discoveries, no unequivocal trace of Alexander's tomb emerged. Explorers often combed the city's ruins with optimism, only to find fragments, inscriptions, or structures that tantalizingly suggested connections to the Macedonian conqueror, but never conclusive proof. One significant challenge was Alexandria's transformation over 2 millennia. The city, situated on a delta prone to subsidence, had partially sunk beneath the Mediterranean due to earthquakes and rising sea levels. Portions of the Hellenistic city, including temples and mausoleums, were now underwater. This submerged landscape made traditional excavation methods insufficient. Explorers often relied on coastal surveys, diving expeditions, and early forms of sonar mapping, yet the vastness of the submerged ruins rendered precise location almost impossible. Historical accounts also complicated the search. Ancient texts describing the tomb were fragmentary, contradictory, or deliberately vague. Writers like Plutarch and Strabo mentioned its existence, but details of location, dimensions, and structure were scarce. Medieval Arab and European chronicles added layers of legend and embellishment, mixing historical events with mythical narratives. This mixture of fact and fiction created a scenario in which any physical clue could be interpreted multiple ways, and where misidentification was a constant risk. Despite these obstacles, several prominent explorers attempted to locate the tomb during the 19th century. European archaeologists, sometimes in collaboration with Egyptian authorities, conducted surveys of ancient cemeteries, ruins, and submerged sites. Some researchers focused on the royal quarters of ancient Alexandria, reasoning that the Ptolemies would have placed Alexander's tomb near the centers of power. Others examined the ancient city's temples and coastal mausoleums, hoping to uncover monumental structures that could house a figure of Alexander's stature. Each expedition produced intriguing findings, fragments of statues, inscriptions referencing Macedonian rulers, and traces of ceremonial architecture, but none definitively linked to Alexander himself. The early 20th century saw technological innovation in the search. Underwater archaeology, though in its infancy, began to reveal submerged streets and structures in the western harbor of Alexandria. Divers reported blocks of stone, columns, and remnants of buildings, some of which may have been part of the original Hellenistic city. Yet even with these advances, the specific identification of a tomb remained out of reach. The city's continual transformation, sedimentation, and urban development had made locating the tomb akin to finding a needle in a historical haystack. Historical accounts also complicated the search. Ancient texts describing the tomb were fragmentary, contradictory, or deliberately vague. Writers like Plutarch and Strabo mentioned its existence, but details of location, dimensions, and structure were scarce. Medieval Arab and European chronicles added layers of legend and embellishment, mixing historical events with mythical narratives. This mixture of fact and fiction created a scenario in which any physical clue could be interpreted multiple ways, and where misidentification was a constant risk. Despite these obstacles, several prominent explorers attempted to locate the tomb during the 19th century. European archaeologists, sometimes in collaboration with Egyptian authorities, conducted surveys of ancient cemeteries, ruins, and submerged sites. Some researchers focused on the royal quarters of ancient Alexandria, reasoning that the Ptolemies would have placed Alexander's tomb near the centers of power. Others examined the ancient city's temples and coastal mausoleums, hoping to uncover monumental structures that could house a figure of Alexander's stature. Each expedition produced intriguing findings, fragments of statues, inscriptions referencing Macedonian rulers, and traces of ceremonial architecture, but none definitively linked to Alexander himself. The early 20th century saw technological innovation in the search. Underwater archaeology, though in its infancy, began to reveal submerged streets and structures in the western harbor of Alexandria. Divers reported blocks of stone, columns, and remnants of buildings, some of which may have been part of the original Hellenistic city. Yet even with these advances, the specific identification of a tomb remained out of reach. The city's continual transformation, sedimentation, and urban development had made locating the tomb akin to finding a needle in a historical haystack. In addition to environmental challenges, the politics of the region played a role in limiting systematic investigation. Egypt experienced social and political upheavals, foreign occupations, and administrative changes during this period, often delaying or redirecting archaeological projects. Access to key areas of the ancient city was sometimes restricted, further complicating the pursuit of Alexander's tomb. Legends and rumors continued to fuel exploration. Tales of immense treasures, ceremonial artifacts, and inscriptions with hidden knowledge persisted in the imagination of both scholars and adventurers. Some expeditions were motivated more by the promise of wealth or fame than by academic curiosity, leading to sensationalized reports of discoveries that ultimately proved inconclusive. These myths, however, reinforced the allure of the tomb and ensured that each generation of explorers would inherit the challenge of locating it. By the mid-20th century, the search had grown increasingly multidisciplinary. Archaeologists combined historical analysis with geological surveys, underwater exploration, and early remote sensing techniques. Satellite imagery and aerial photography, though rudimentary by modern standards, were employed to map submerged ruins and identify anomalies that might indicate large structures. Some researchers suggested that the tomb could be hidden in parts of the city now buried beneath layers of sediment or beneath modern Alexandria itself, a scenario that would make excavation extraordinarily difficult without disruptive and potentially destructive intervention. Despite decades of investigation, the tomb's exact location remains unknown. The combination of deliberate concealment by the Ptolemies, natural disasters, urban transformation, and the vagueness of historical sources has created a historical puzzle unlike any other. Alexander, a man who reshaped the world, had been reduced to stories, fragments, and speculation, his final resting place lost to time. The enduring mystery of Alexander's tomb illustrates the intersection of history, legend, and human ambition. It is not merely a quest for a physical site, it is a journey into the ways history is recorded, preserved, and sometimes deliberately obscured. Each attempt to locate the tomb, whether driven by scholarship, adventure, or treasure hunting, reflects the profound impact Alexander had on the world, and the fascination his life and death continue to inspire. Modern theories and the hunt beneath Alexandria. The 20th and 21st centuries brought unprecedented technological tools to the centuries-long search for Alexander the Great's tomb. Modern archaeology, geophysics, and underwater exploration offered methods far beyond the shovels and rudimentary diving techniques of earlier explorers. Yet even with these advancements, the tomb remained frustratingly elusive, concealed by millennia of environmental change, urban development, and perhaps deliberate secrecy. One of the most widely discussed modern theories centers on the western harbor of Alexandria. Ancient accounts suggest that significant Hellenistic monuments lined the harbors, including the royal quarter and public structures that might have contained Alexander's tomb. Over time, earthquakes and tsunamis gradually submerged large portions of the coastline, potentially swallowing streets, temples, and mausoleums. Marine archaeologists began to investigate the harbor, uncovering columns, statues, and large stone blocks, some adorned with inscriptions or reliefs that hinted at their Hellenistic origin. While these findings confirmed the presence of monumental structures, none were definitively linked to Alexander. Some scholars propose that the tomb may have been constructed on an island or artificial mound that later sank beneath the Mediterranean. Historical records indicate that Alexandria underwent repeated urban planning and reconstruction over centuries, often over previous foundations. This raises the possibility that Alexander's final resting place, if it survived natural disasters, may now lie buried under both sediment and modern construction, concealed in plain sight beneath parts of present-day Alexandria. Another prominent theory focuses on the mausoleum described in Roman sources. Accounts suggest that Julius Caesar, Augustus, and other emperors visited a tomb believed to house Alexander's remains. Scholars debate whether this structure was located in the royal quarter, within the city's main necropolis, or elsewhere entirely. The lack of archaeological confirmation leaves room for speculation. Some argue that the tomb may have been relocated multiple times, intentionally moved by Ptolemaic rulers or Roman authorities to protect it from looters or political rivals. Such a practice would be consistent with the historical pattern of secrecy surrounding Alexander's remains. Technological advances in the 20th century, particularly sonar mapping and submersible diving, allowed researchers to examine submerged portions of Alexandria with greater precision. The French and Egyptian governments collaborated on projects that revealed entire streets, docks, and submerged buildings. While some of these discoveries generated headlines as potential lost tombs, closer analysis often identified them as temples, warehouses, or administrative structures rather than burial sites. Nevertheless, these explorations confirmed that large portions of ancient Alexandria were underwater, underscoring the difficulty of locating any tomb with certainty. Satellite imaging and geophysical surveys have provided additional insights, allowing researchers to detect anomalies beneath modern urban layers and sediment deposits. Some anomalies, rectangular outlines, unusually dense stone foundations, or clusters of columns, have been interpreted as possible monumental architecture. However, without excavation, the identity of these structures remains speculative. The combination of urban density, modern construction, and sediment layers complicates access, making it nearly impossible to conduct invasive exploration without disrupting the contemporary city. Historical analysis continues to play a vital role alongside technology. Scholars meticulously cross-reference ancient texts, maps, and accounts, looking for patterns or overlooked details that might indicate the tomb's location. These include the writings of Plutarch, Strabo, and Diodorus, medieval Arab historians like al-Masudi, and early modern European travelers. By comparing geographic clues, descriptions of monumental structures, and urban layouts, researchers attempt to narrow down potential sites for excavation or underwater exploration. Yet some historians argue that the tomb may never be found, regardless of technological advances. Multiple factors could have led to its disappearance: deliberate concealment by the Ptolemies, natural disasters that destroyed or submerged the structure, urban redevelopment that obscured its location, or even looting in antiquity. The combination of these factors suggests that Alexander's final resting place may remain hidden indefinitely, a deliberate or accidental erasure of history that mirrors the broader impermanence of human achievement. The mystery of the tomb also continues to inspire speculative theories. Some propose that the Ptolemies deliberately misled historians and chroniclers, creating conflicting accounts to protect the tomb from political rivals. Others suggest that Alexander's remains were hidden in a secret underground chamber beneath the city or even transported to an undisclosed location outside Alexandria, perhaps in the Nile Delta or elsewhere in Egypt. While such claims are difficult to substantiate, they highlight the enduring fascination with the idea of a lost tomb and the potential treasures it may contain. Cultural and symbolic significance ensures that the search for Alexander's tomb is more than an archaeological endeavor. The tomb represents the legacy of one of history's most influential figures, the power of memory, and the human desire to connect with greatness. For scholars, explorers, and enthusiasts, locating the tomb would not only solve a millennia-old mystery but also offer a tangible link to the world that Alexander shaped, his empire, his vision, and his enduring impact on history. Legends, mysteries, and modern conspiracies. Even as modern archaeology seeks empirical evidence, Alexander the Great's tomb has continued to captivate the human imagination. Over the centuries, myths, rumors, and conspiracy theories have proliferated, intertwining with historical accounts and ensuring that the tomb is not just a lost burial site but a symbol of mystery, power, and intrigue. One of the most persistent legends concerns the treasures believed to accompany Alexander's remains. Ancient sources describe elaborate burial practices, golden sarcophagi, ceremonial armor, weapons, and precious jewels. Over time, storytellers expanded these accounts into tales of unimaginable wealth, hidden chambers, and sacred relics. By the Renaissance, European explorers and treasure hunters were combing Alexandria with visions of vast hoards, often inspired as much by imagination as by historical texts. Modern conspiracy theories sometimes suggest that these treasures may include objects of immense cultural, religious, or even technological significance, hidden to prevent misuse by the unworthy or politically ambitious. Another enduring myth is that of mystical knowledge. Some writers have speculated that Alexander, whose conquests extended into India and Central Asia, acquired secret wisdom, esoteric teachings, codices, or maps that were buried with him. Legends even suggest that he possessed knowledge of the cosmos, alchemical secrets, or strategies for global dominion, preserved in encrypted writings or symbolic artifacts. While these claims are speculative, they underscore the symbolic weight of the tomb. It is not merely a grave, but a repository of power, knowledge, and legacy. Modern conspiracy theories often link the tomb to secret societies or covert historical agendas. Some claim that rulers or religious authorities intentionally obscured Alexander's tomb to control access to his perceived authority. Others propose that the Ptolemies, Romans, or even later dynasties may have created misleading records, relocated the tomb, or deliberately destroyed portions of the city to conceal its location. These theories, while difficult to substantiate, highlight the enduring human tendency to intertwine power and secrecy, particularly when dealing with historical figures of immense influence. Popular culture has also amplified these myths. From novels and films to documentaries and online forums, the idea of a lost tomb filled with treasure, secret knowledge, or mystical power resonates deeply. This cultural fascination has sometimes fueled pseudo-archaeological claims, alleged discoveries, misinterpreted artifacts, or sensationalist reports that capture headlines but provide little verifiable evidence. Yet even these speculative narratives demonstrate the tomb's significance as a symbol of enduring intrigue. The combination of legend, historical ambiguity, and cultural obsession has created a unique dynamic. Alexander's tomb occupies a liminal space between history and myth. On one hand, credible historical accounts suggest its existence and importance. On the other, centuries of lost knowledge, environmental changes, and deliberate obfuscation have transformed it into a nearly mythical object. The very act of searching for the tomb, therefore, becomes a study not only of archaeology but also of human imagination, ambition, and the construction of historical memory. The role of Alexandria itself cannot be overstated in sustaining these legends. The city's shifting geography, with submerged streets and monuments, lends itself to speculation. Divers, archaeologists, and historians continue to uncover structures that hint at grandeur, yet every discovery raises more questions than answers. The interplay of partially lost history and enduring myth ensures that the tomb's mystery will remain compelling for both scholars and the public alike. In addition, some conspiracy theorists link the tomb to broader narratives about the rewriting of history. The idea that the world's greatest conqueror could be literally erased from memory, buried beneath layers of sand, sediment, and human construction, fuels speculation about hidden knowledge, suppressed history, and intentional manipulation of the past. While often speculative, these interpretations reflect genuine historical phenomena, deliberate concealment, selective record keeping, and the vulnerability of human memory over millennia. Despite, or perhaps because of, these myths, the tomb continues to inspire exploration. Archaeologists, historians, and adventurers are drawn not only by the possibility of wealth or knowledge but also by the allure of solving a puzzle that has captivated the world for over 2,000 years. The tomb represents both a tangible connection to Alexander himself and a symbolic testament to the power of history, legend, and human curiosity. Modern searches and the hidden truths. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the search for Alexander the Great's tomb has intensified with the aid of cutting-edge technology and international collaboration. Yet, despite advanced methods, the tomb remains hidden, a testament to the enduring mystery that has baffled scholars for over 2 millennia. One of the primary modern theories centers on the royal quarter of ancient Alexandria, near what was once the city's administrative and ceremonial hub. Historical texts suggest that the Ptolemies would have wanted Alexander's final resting place close to their centers of power to enhance their legitimacy. Excavations and underwater surveys in this area have uncovered monumental foundations, statues, and large burial complexes, but none definitively linked to Alexander. Researchers continue to examine these sites using ground-penetrating radar, 3D mapping, and sediment analysis, seeking clues that could reveal concealed chambers beneath modern buildings. Another focus is the Western Harbour, which has long been considered a likely location for Hellenistic monuments. Submerged streets, docks, and colonnaded structures have been identified by marine archaeologists, and some speculate that the tomb may lie beneath or within these sunken ruins. Underwater archaeology in Alexandria is uniquely challenging due to shifting sands, strong currents, and modern port activity. Nonetheless, discoveries of statues, sphinx fragments, and inscribed blocks hint at monumental construction, possibly associated with the royal necropolis. Some researchers propose that the tomb could have been relocated or deliberately hidden during antiquity. The Ptolemies, Romans, or later rulers may have moved Alexander's remains to protect them from looters, rival factions, or political upheaval. The practice of relocating royal tombs was not unprecedented in ancient Egypt and Macedonia, and textual evidence suggests the possibility of secret chambers, underground tunnels, or subterranean mausoleums designed to obscure the final resting place. Urban transformation presents another formidable obstacle. Modern Alexandria is built atop layers of history, from Roman and Byzantine settlements to Ottoman and contemporary constructions. Excavating without disrupting the city is nearly impossible, meaning that key evidence may lie directly beneath streets, buildings, or infrastructure. Sedimentation and environmental changes, including earthquakes and rising sea levels, may have buried or destroyed parts of the original tomb, leaving only hints detectable through non-invasive technology. Recent decades have also seen the application of remote sensing and satellite imaging to identify anomalies indicative of large structures. Researchers analyze subtle variations in soil density, magnetic fields, and topography to detect buried architecture. While promising, these techniques have yet to produce definitive evidence, and interpreting anomalies is complicated by the dense urban environment and layers of sediment deposited over centuries. The persistent legends surrounding Alexander's tomb continue to influence modern searches. Myths of treasure, mystical knowledge, and secret inscriptions fuel public interest and sometimes attract amateur explorers alongside professional archaeologists. While many claims lack scientific basis, they demonstrate the tomb's enduring symbolic power. The combination of myth, historical accounts, and technological evidence keeps the search alive, bridging the gap between scholarly investigation and popular imagination. Experts also consider the possibility that Alexander's tomb may never be found. The combined effects of deliberate concealment, natural disasters, urban development, and looting over centuries make it plausible that the physical structure has been lost or irreparably damaged. Even so, historical and archaeological evidence strongly suggests that it once existed, and that its influence shaped the political and cultural landscape of Alexandria for centuries. The ongoing search reflects not only a quest for a tomb but also a pursuit of understanding human history and memory. Alexander's tomb is emblematic of how power, legend, and time interact. Its disappearance illustrates the fragility of historical knowledge and the lengths to which civilizations will go to protect or manipulate symbols of authority. As modern archaeology continues to advance, hope remains that non-invasive techniques, underwater exploration, and careful analysis of ancient texts may one day reveal the tomb's location. Until then, the mystery of Alexander's final resting place endures, a reminder of history's capacity for both preservation and erasure. Legacy, mystery, and the enduring fascination. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who forged an empire stretching from Greece to India, remains one of history's most extraordinary figures. His military genius, political vision, and cultural impact reshaped the ancient world. Yet, paradoxically, the final chapter of his life, the resting place of his body, remains a mystery that has eluded historians, archaeologists, and adventurers for more than 2 millennia. From the moment of his death in Babylon in 323 BCE, Alexander's burial became a matter of profound political and symbolic importance. His body, initially intended for Macedonia, was diverted to Egypt by Ptolemy, who sought to legitimize his own claim to power. In Alexandria, a city founded to immortalize the conqueror's vision, Alexander's tomb became both a shrine and a tool of authority, a tangible connection between rulers and the legendary figure whose legacy they wished to harness. Over the centuries, the tomb's prominence and accessibility shifted. Roman emperors, including Julius Caesar and Augustus, visited it as a symbol of continuity and power. Yet, even then, secrecy surrounded the site, and the tomb's exact location remained closely guarded. Natural disasters, including earthquakes and the gradual subsidence of Alexandria, altered the landscape, submerging portions of the city and concealing the tomb further. Medieval and early Islamic perspectives transformed the narrative of Alexander and his tomb. Identified by some as Dul-Qarnayn, Alexander became a figure of legend, revered as a wise ruler and seeker of knowledge. Stories of treasures, esoteric wisdom, and protective curses proliferated, blending historical accounts with mythology. These legends reinforce the tomb's significance while simultaneously obscuring its reality. During the Renaissance and early modern period, European scholars and explorers renewed interest in Alexandria, combing texts, ruins, and submerged sites for clues. Archaeology became more systematic in the 19th and 20th centuries, with modern techniques such as underwater surveys, remote sensing, and geophysical mapping offering new ways to investigate the city. Yet each technological advance underscored the challenges: urban development, sedimentation, submerged structures, and centuries of myth complicated the search. Modern theories propose several possible locations for Alexander's tomb: the royal quarter, the western harbour, or subterranean structures hidden beneath modern Alexandria. Some suggest it may have been relocated or destroyed. Regardless of its physical state, the tomb continues to inspire fascination, representing the intersection of history, legend, and the human desire to connect with greatness. The enduring mystery of Alexander's tomb is also a story about history itself. It demonstrates how memory can be preserved, altered, or deliberately obscured, how political power can shape narrative, and how legend can intertwine with fact over centuries. The tomb, whether hidden, submerged, or lost forever, serves as a symbol of impermanence and the limits of human knowledge. Yet perhaps the most profound reason the tomb captivates us is symbolic. Alexander's life embodies ambition, vision, and conquest on an unparalleled scale. The inability to locate his final resting place adds a layer of enigma, reinforcing the notion that history can be both monumental and elusive. The story of the tomb is not merely about a physical location, it is about legacy, cultural memory, and the enduring fascination with one of humanity's most extraordinary figures. In the end, the hidden tomb of Alexander the Great remains an unsolved historical puzzle. Its mystery invites scholars and enthusiasts to explore, question, and imagine, bridging past and present in a pursuit that is as much about understanding human ambition as it is about uncovering stone and gold. The tomb, though hidden, continues to live in the collective imagination, a testament to the enduring power of one man's life and the civilizations he shaped. Whether it will ever be found remains uncertain, but the legend of Alexander's hidden tomb has already secured a permanent place in history, an enduring symbol of mystery, power, and the human drive to seek out what has been lost.